Hey guys, welcome back and happy 2026. I know this is the second month, the last day of February feels like, and we're saying Happy New Year, but we're back at the Retail Perch after a couple of months. Gary, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And it was a busy couple months, right?
I know,
Between
2 months
NRF
into
and FMI.
2026, can't believe it already, right? Feels like the future is coming at you faster than it ever did before.
Exponentially fast.
I know, and especially with all the news and tech that's coming out on a daily basis, it feels like, like a week feels like a long time,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think what we wanted to do here is kind of give you guys a quick overview of some of the changes that are happening at the Retail Perch. And historically, what we've done about 120 odd episodes so far. And a lot of that has been around inviting guests and having conversations with them to get different perspectives. But we feel that given the number of things that are happening in technology and the level of insights that we're now able to gain through Birdseye and the data that we have, we felt that it would be, useful to be able to provide some of our commentary on what's happening in the industry and any insights that we can provide from what we're seeing that could benefit the larger ecosystem here. So, uh, Gary, did I cover that right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, given the pace of change and the new capabilities that are opening up almost, by the week here, I think this is a good time to shift direction a little bit. And, you and I discuss some of these things. And I think the other dimension of this is not only what the capabilities are, but the implications of some of these capabilities for the retail industry, right?
Right.
Because I think increasingly some of these things really begin driving at the heart of how retail works, how retail goes to market, business models, operating models, and so on.
Yeah, and I think what I also want to do in this process is to, I think, ease the sense of panic that's out there. There is, I think, a perceivable sense of panic in terms of what the future holds because of things changing so fast. I think there are some things that don't change, and I would love to kind of talk about what does not change, and see how we can amplify what you're doing today with new technologies that are coming in, right? Because
Yeah.
fundamentally, retail is not changing. People are still going to go and buy products that they need and want on a regular basis. So that foundation of retail doesn't change. How they go about doing it and how you service them is what is going to potentially change and get
Yeah.
impacted. But we're here to kind of unpack some of that for you in this episode and coming episodes of the Retail Perch. So, Gary, where should we start?
Let's start with some of the new capabilities, some of the new things you're seeing, Shaker, in the world of technology, specifically around new AI capabilities, and maybe a preview of some of the things Birdseye and you are looking at right now.
Yeah. So we just came off the a bunch of shows like Gary said, FMI, NRF, NGA, and there's a few more coming up now. But I want to kind of make sure I credit the right person. But Parag Shah at the NGA did a really good presentation, I thought, on explaining AI to the audience. And I want to use that same model. So he broke down AI into three buckets, so three types of AI. So he called it predictive AI,
Yeah,
which is really more machine learning, forecasting, demand gen, statistical, really math derived model. Then the second piece is what I would call generative AI, which
yeah,
is really language models and tied to understanding natural language, responding to prompts, which is what everybody knows as Chat GPT and Claude and Gemini and all these models, which are really prompt driven. And then the third is what do you call it? Agentic AI, which is
yeah,
kind of like it's all the buzz right now, right? And agentic AI is really about creating agents, which are really nothing but really small software programs that have access to LLMs that will execute tasks for you. And you can have one agent, or you can have a bunch of agents. You can have an agent managing other agents. Um, but think of them really as virtual workers of some sort that have access to an LLM to understand your commands and execute stuff, right? So that's kind of like the three broad areas. Gary, I think we can talk about specific use cases of where each of these things falls
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, where they fit. And I guess the other call out here, I think that sort of speaks to the world we're living in today. The first, the predictive AI, et cetera, has been around for some time. I think a lot of people, retailers, didn't realize maybe it was embedded in some of the capabilities solutions they were using, but it's been around a while. Generative AI really, what, in the last 3 years or so, hit big and everyone talking about it. Agentic AI, what, within the past year has really become a hot topic. So these different areas of AI are coming at us increasingly fast, but they are opening up the door to just incredible capabilities.
I think for a retailer listening to this, the question is, how does this affect my business, right?
Yeah.
How can I use these technologies? Where do they apply for my business? Because I think there's also just today we heard, I think Jack Dorsey, who's the founder of Twitter, runs a company called Block, and I think they're laying off 40% of their
Yes.
employees because they're saying they're getting savings from AI, and we don't need as many people. And I think the general fear in the retail industry, which is such a huge employer of people, um, is people feel that, hey, is this going to actually affect that? And it's a very real fear. And I at this point, it feels to me that AI in its current form is going to more impact software development more than it will direct and service industries and anything that has language associated with it more
Yeah.
than any other industry.
So I would agree with that. I guess the way I think of it is I think the impact on store level operations, store level personnel is probably somewhere out in the future a little bit yet. But if you back up a step to like distribution centers, warehouses, it's already impacting, right? In the form of automation, seeing massive automated distribution centers operating with a dozen or 2 dozen people that used to take,
Armies of
hundreds of
people.
people.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I
So
think paper pushing, anything that's tied to paper, Excel, there's going to be a lot of automation and optimization in those specific fields.
yes,
Right. So maybe, Gary, we start with kind of breaking it down into predictive AI. Where does that fall into the enterprise? Right. And I know from a bird's eye perspective, I can tell you that we have been using predictive AI, machine learning models, statistical models for as long as I can remember. But a simple example would be, or and something that we've been building, which is trying to predict performance of, let's say, a coupon or an ad
yeah,
out in the future, right? Where you need historical data to build out these statistical models, which can accurately, to the best possible way, predict the performance of that. And that is just taking raw data, converting it into insights, which is more predictive in nature. They're not
right,
language models. They don't understand language. They just put out. It's kind of like the weather forecast, right? So weather forecast is probably the simplest way to understand predictive models, and weather is complicated, which is
yeah.
why the weatherman is the only job where you can consistently get it wrong and still keep your job. But that's kind of where predictive AI would fall in.
Yeah,
What used to happen also, Gary, is that the LLMs as we see today are actually sophisticated predictive machines, right?
yes,
And that's kind of where they started. Like you had Grammarly, which would complete your sentence or suggest the next word. that you should be
Right.
typing, but their capabilities were minimal because they could only do a couple of words at a time based on the sentence that you started
Yeah.
typing. Um, and I think when that context expanded to whole paragraphs and books, I think that changed the narrative on what it went from predictive to what we now call
Yeah.
LLMs.
Yeah. Yeah. So what another way to help people think about this, Shaker, that predictive AI is really built in to different capabilities, like Birdzi's, some of Birdzi's platform, predicting the performance of a coupon or a campaign or whatever. And then as we start thinking about generative AI, now the retailers, the teams actually begin to interact with that technology.
Yeah, I think the other way to look about generative AI is it's content generation, right? Whereas predictive AI is predicting an outcome,
Yeah,
not necessarily generating content for you. So you're saying, hey, if I put this item, so like price forecasting, demand forecasting, right, would be a classic case. How much do I think this box, this soup is going to sell 2 weeks from now, right?
yeah,
Given these conditions. And so that is purely statistical modeling. You get an output. Uh, the output is usable from a perspective of you have now implemented. But where generative AI starts becoming different is actually generating content that is directly usable in
yeah,
some medium, right? So whether it is marketing content that you want to generate, you wanted to write an email based on a certain set of thread, it's actually generating content for you as opposed to, and because I think the way we think of, because language is immediately interpretable as
right.
opposed to numbers, right? I think humans see that as more immediately usable.
So, yes, I'd agree with that. And, I think thinking of retail, it seems to be more widely adopted in the area of marketing,
Yes.
generating copy, ad copy, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, like I can, think of a world where you log in to a retailer's website, right? And because you have a known ID in your customer history, think of that front page on that retailer being customized to you, right? Where
Yes.
it says, "Hey Gary, welcome back," and there's some content and there's some messaging that's very personalized to you.
Yep.
Um, that's kind of where generative AI capabilities would really shine because they're able to then generate content that is very specific to the context, right?
Yes.
And
I,
today, of
I,
course, people are using it for emails and headers and all kinds of stuff, right? So
yeah. Yeah. And being able to do that at massive scale.
correct. Correct. Right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I feel things are going towards is LLMs are going to get more enterprise specific.
Yeah.
You're going to have domain specific models like this is a retail expert or a retail customer service expert, right? And I think people are already using it in a big way. So you have two types of generative AI companies. You have what I would call foundation model companies. These are companies that are building the underlying model, like you know, uh, ChatGPT 5.3, right?
Yeah.
Or Opus 4.6. These are what I would call foundation models. And then you have companies that layer on top of that, which I'd call wrapper companies, they're
Yeah.
essentially using these LLMs to generate content on a specific context, right? So you could have like a Canva, right, which is a popular
Right.
marketing tool that is then underlying using these LLMs to generate content for the specific purpose
For
that
this
you're trying.
narrow, yeah.
Exactly, right. And I think what most people wind up using is some of these wrappers
Yeah.
if they want to do something very specific, right? So you have a chat bot maybe included in your website, but that chat bot has been trained with some prompts to act in a very specific scenario. But in the back end, it's actually using one of these LLMs to actually generate the
Yeah.
content
Yeah.
and format
Yeah.
it. So that's kind of like the more generative AI component. Where we see it going is it's going to get very domain specific. So you're going to have healthcare LLMs. You're going to have,
Yes.
LLMs for, I don't know, your email writing. You're going to have LLMs for finance. CFOs are going to have their own LLMs. I mean, so I think it's going to get very domain specific, where it's providing you very specific direction, language, and guidance on things
So,
that you need.
so I think there's also another side to that. So domain specific, but also user specific, right? The more
Correct.
you interact with these tools, the more they get to know you and how you think, how you write, how you interact with it.
Right.
It, it begins to tailor the output to you.
Correct. Correct. But and the limitations with LLMs is they tend to be reliant on a prompt to give you an answer,
Yes.
right? So they're unable to take action on them on their own. And it's kind of where we get into the agentic side,
Right.
right? So the agentic side is essentially a software program that's using an LLM to execute a task that you've given it. So an agent um, requires three things: it needs a role, it needs a goal, and it needs some context, right?
Yeah.
So you would typically say, hey, you're an agent that is a retail analytics expert. Your goal is to identify trends in retail data that may point to performance impacts, right?
Yeah.
And the context is, you know here's the broader context. This is a store with 25 stores in its chain, XYZ. So you provide context. And now what this agent has, it has very specific direction in terms of what it needs to do, right? And what outcomes you're looking to do. What happened, Gary, in the last year is that you could create these singular agents, but in the last year or so, you've had a number of frameworks that came about which allow you to have a team of agents,
Yeah.
which means now you could have one agent, which is kind of like, think of it as a manager agent, right?
Is orchestrating
Exactly.
the more task specific agents.
So basically, one agent could complete its job, and it could collaborate and pass that data over to another agent, which is waiting for that
Yeah.
information. It takes it, and then so there's another agent that's overseeing it, another agent that's maybe verifying the validity of the answer and doing QA. So you now have these team of agents. These agents by themselves aren't intelligent. They're
Yeah.
really reliant on the underlying LLM to produce. They've just been given instructions about where to take the input and pass it to the next
Right.
person.
And isn't another piece of this, I don't want to say puzzle, but needed is for these agents, creating some governance and guardrails around them. So, for example, a price optimization agent um, operates within certain guardrails, right? It can only change the price of a product by a maximum of X%. It can only do that within a 7-day period. The margin cannot drop below Y, that type of thing.
Yeah, you'd have to give it very specific
It-
guardrails.
yeah, but isn't that obviously depending upon the task? I would see that's a pretty needed or important piece of this.
I don't know if you've been following the news, but in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about this agentic framework called OpenClaw,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an open source AI agentic framework. And the reason it was in the news a lot because it kind of went haywire on somebody's computer and deleted a whole
Yeah.
bunch of files in their inbox and a whole bunch of things. So I think the people are realizing that while the agentic framework is very powerful, if you don't provide some guardrails around what it can and cannot do, and there's more recent news about what Anthropic and the Pentagon are going through right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all really around how do you impose these guardrails on these
Right.
agents to take, because now you're going beyond a prompt and an answer. You're essentially instructing or giving the agent the permission to execute some tasks.
Yes. Within those boundaries. And
Right.
I think so, I guess where that takes me is, back to the impact of AI broadly on the workforce, on workers, et cetera. Um, it's shifting human focus from making those millions of decisions to helping build those guardrails, create those boundaries for these agents to work within. So
Correct.
sort of a higher level of thinking, higher level of work.
Right. And these agents underlying are using these LLMs to understand your instructions, and they could potentially be using other tools that you may give them access to, right? They
Yes.
could be using predictive AI. They could be using some other forecasting technology. They could be accessing websites
Yeah.
to pull information together, right? So think of these agents as really orchestration layers that go out, pull information, call specific tools to get stuff done.
It's the Retail Perch, presented by Birdseye, where grocery meets actionable intelligence.
This really begins to lead to, in my mind, transforming how retail is organized, how it works, how it operates. I mean, yes, at the end of the day, maybe the basic business model remains, right? Buying product from a number of different brand manufacturers, et cetera, distributing that, to the store, where shoppers can buy it. But all the decisions involved with all the myriad steps in that process, from assortment decisions to pricing decisions, inventory decisions, promotion decisions, all of those things will become, I think, over time, more and more automated through these agents and in the orchestration of those agents.
Yeah, 100%. I think what's then becomes important is the human who knows what the objective is, right? So the objective still has to be decided by the human.
Yes.
What's the outcome you're looking to uh, get out of all these processes? And you need somebody who understands the business, is able to clearly define the guardrails.
Yeah.
Um, because I think at the end of the day, I think we're starting early where we don't want to hand over the keys to these agents or these AIs, right?
Yes.
And I think what happens also, Gary, is that people talk about AI as if it is this independent entity that lives in something. I mean, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, these are still, computer programs, albeit
It's
they're sophisticated, but they're running on some CPU and some computer.
yeah.
They aren't really a living being.
Right. Right.
Right? And I think a lot of people are it sounds like fun to say, hey, the Skynet is alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yes.
we're a long way from that, right?
Yeah. 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 But so I think there is a transformation that is maybe in the very early stages here
Hmm.
of happening, but something that, certainly I think executives need to start thinking about as this happens. And it's really not, in my mind, it's not about automation for the sake of, reducing labor costs and getting rid of people, et cetera. In my mind, the way to look at all this is really augmenting humans with machine capabilities to make them more effective. Um, or one of my favorite words, right? Becoming bionic.
Yeah, like you are, right? So Gary's got two knees and a shoulder.
I
Um,
just need to add some sensors to some of this hardware, and God
that's
knows what
right.
could happen.
That's right. And I think the other way to think about it, Gary, is I think, you know, you think about what AI tools are available to increase productivity of
Yeah,
the employee, right? Of the worker. So those could be tools from, get them access to ChatGPT or Gemini, to formulate, to create PowerPoints, to create, things that you
yeah,
do on a day-to-day basis. I think the second piece is, are there processes in my business that can be automated? better,
Yeah.
right? Where can AI play a role in improving and optimizing my business processes? Like
Yeah.
maybe there's, you know, there's handwritten notes that you're now scanning and somebody's actually manually entering it in. Maybe there's a whole process that can be automated there where that information's, OCR technology is unbelievable now, so you can probably just import that directly into the computer. So there's, and I think the third is how can you embed AI in your programs, right? Which is how can you make your pricing engine smarter because it's using predictive AI to come up with better approaches. And
Yes.
then if you think about a fourth level, it's really orchestrating some of these processes to work together. But I
Yeah.
think if people were to think of those in those three buckets, and it really takes three different types of skill sets, being able to understand what tools are best useful for your team to increase productivity, right? The
Yeah.
second is, somebody who understands business processes to look at, hey, what processes can be automated, right? Or maybe there's whole systems that automate this that are better than having a
Yes.
few legacy systems. And third is, how do I, the third one is a little bit more tricky because it requires a lot of technical talent to embed AI or come up with
Yeah.
your own models internally. And then I think a lot of supermarkets, tier one and tier two, have some challenges acquiring the kind of talent that it takes to
Oh,
build these systems,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So I think the first two, I think, have massive gains in themselves. I think the third piece probably right now accessible more to the larger guys who have bigger teams,
Yeah.
but that's a great opportunity for you to partner with the right company who bring that expertise to you.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and I think, well, one thing sort of building on what you're just saying, that, I think a lot of people look at AI and the automation it makes possible, and they go directly to resource savings, right? Well, gee, I don't need a team of 10 people. I can get by with 2 people now doing that. And in some cases, it's very true. Um, but it's also the efficacy of the decisions that system is making can be far more effective, right? And again, I often use Birdseye as an example of that. I could, as a human being, sit down and target specific products or promotions to specific shoppers, go through that iteration. Uh, and at the end of the day, it's going to be, X level of effectiveness. But if I turn that process over to like a Birdseye platform, the decisions that Birdzeye's system is making are not only far more efficient, right? Doing that in seconds or minutes versus hours, days, and weeks, but it's going to be more effective. It's going to get, result in better open rates, better redemption rates, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think so. I think there is, while things are changing really fast, I think for a retailer to understand which pieces of their business can use this technology for the maximum return should really
Yeah.
be where the focus is, right? So understanding where the inefficiencies are in your business, how can I speed it up? I think that's more important than understanding the technology.
So yes, and maybe getting a little thinking ahead, but as you're saying, speed it up. What I'm seeing happen with the development, particularly of agentic capabilities and agents and so on, is that decision time, that decision latency is shortening, right? It's beginning to collapse. And,
Absolutely.
we don't have time to get into it today, but there's a whole discussion around that and the implications of that for how the organization works.
100%. Absolutely. There's no question about it. So I think what's going to become more important is the importance of the human in the loop, so to say.
Yes.
You need people who understand business broadly and understand the processes so that they can use these technologies. It's not like I got a hammer in my hand now everything looks like a nail,
Well,
right?
right. Yeah, no, it's humans helping create the governance, the guardrails, et cetera, and then also dealing with the exceptions that get surfaced from those agents for a human to intervene.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you think about every technology revolution that's happened, Gary. There's whatever 130 years ago when we started electrical distribution, it was all about just getting lights into homes, right? It was about the
Sure.
light bulb and not having the dark. And that was the really the only device that was the primary use case of electricity, right? And I think as we understood the infrastructure, there were more devices and more applications of it that came
Yeah.
around, but that required somebody to understand where this technology could be used to increase efficiency.
Yes.
So I think AI and these LLMs are very much the same way. You got to think of them as foundational. Today, everybody's using them for maybe one or two things, but as you understand your business and understand how to improve effectiveness and efficiency in your
Yeah.
business, you'd be able to come up with better use cases for these technologies.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think this was a great first conversation to sort of kick off the new format here that we're taking the retail perch.
Yeah, and I'd love to get some feedback from folks who are listening to this and saying, "Hey, do you feel this is much more meaningful content for you? And if there's questions that you definitely want us to address, we'd love to get some feedback from you guys to see how we should continue down this journey here." So,
Yeah.
all right, with that, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And Gary, great to have you back, and glad to know you're off your shoulder sling and looking good. And we'll see you around.
All right. Great.
Thanks for listening to The Retail Perch. Follow us on LinkedIn at The Retail Perch for new episodes and updates. For more resources, visit birdseye.com. Catch you next time.